today to our How to Build One HR Team United and Aligned virtual boardroom that is being facilitated by HR Recruit and Deborah Wilkes. My name's Jo Thompson and I'm a consultant for HR Recruit. I'm joined today by Deborah, who will introduce herself shortly. Deborah is going to explore the traps that HR function has fallen into and provide some ideas on how to bring your HR teams together. If you've got any burning questions during the session, then please put them into the chat box facility and we'll cover them as we go along. I'm now going to hand you over to Deborah, who will introduce herself and start the event. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Great to see you. Thank you for joining. It's always such a treat when people actually turn up for a webinar because it's so tempting to say, oh, I'll just catch the recording, and then actually you probably don't. And having actual real people to talk to, I can see some faces, which is brilliant. So thank you for turning up. So my introduction, my background was in HR. I worked my way up the hard way and led an HR function for Europe, first in the IT sector and then in the pharmaceutical sector. And then I went into leadership and management development as a consultant, set up my own business and did that for about 20 years before really reconnecting with my HR background. Because I always kept going to the CIPD events and I'd sort of say, what are you working on now? What's happening? And began to realize it'd be interesting to know if I've got a few of you I can see, whether you nod or not, that actually the HR function hadn't moved on very much since I was in it 20 odd years ago or before. So what we decided to do, myself and some colleagues, we set up Enable HR and we researched that and actually set up this business to tackle that. How do we take the function forward? So I'll share my screen and we'll get going. So thank you to enter full screen. Yes, there we are. Thank you, Jo, for the opportunity. I mean, she's got such a great network. So thank you for inviting me to do this. So we're going to look at how to build one HR team. And this is something that I've been working on really just for about a year now, because I was doing a lot of work on HR business partnering. So helping HR BPs to move to the next level, helping functions to work more strategically. And even though I wasn't expecting to work on the operating model for HR, it kept coming up. So we did some work on that and worked out how to clarify this for HR leaders. So I'm going to be using Menti. So do grab your phone or whatever device you've got handy and go into menti.com because then you'll go straight into this screen. So menti.com as opposed to mentimeter.com, menti.com, and then you'll be able to enter this code and participate because it really is good to get your input. Every time I ask you to contribute, that number and the website will come up again. So if you're now struggling to find your phone in your bag or whatever, you'll get another chance to see that. And there is the jolly old QR code there. So that's a very easy way to do it. So what we're going to talk about today is the background to this, why it's important, look at some of the HR operating models that have been suggested, look at what can go wrong and what has gone wrong with some, how to build one HR team, and building the reputation of the function. So the first Menti question, it would be really nice to know who we've got on the call. So are you an HRBP or are you in a centre of excellence or expertise? Are you in shared services or a generalist, external, HR leader or a stakeholder of HR? This is good. We've already got a nice mix. I'll give you another minute. So that's interesting, isn't it? We haven't got COE people, so they weren't motivated to join. That's really interesting. Thank you. So we've got a good representation, got some generalists, which actually I always was in my career, and some leaders. So do put in your questions in the chat.
Deborah, sorry, just thinking, don't forget to mention about your book as well.
Oh, my book, yes. So thank you. I always forget this. I'm rubbish at selling my book. But my book is called Empowering HR. It's endorsed by Dave Ulrich. And if you would like to be entered for a draw, I will give away 3 copies signed, post them off to you. So if you would like to enter that draw, please put your email address in the chat, and then you'll automatically be entered for the draw. Oh, we have got a COE person and a shared services person. So we've got really good breadth here. Thank you very much. So the story, I've kind of already told you this story. One of the things that when I was talking to HR people in those days of realizing that maybe HR does need help to move on, HR people used to say, we know we need to change, but we don't know how. And so the subject of our research, the question we were asking was, what is it that businesses need from HR? Because, people complain about HR, don't they? And that gets me so annoyed because half the time they don't even know what they're talking about. They don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And that is part of HR's challenge to make sure that that does come across. So that was our question. And as a result of that research, we built this framework for HR capabilities. So you may have seen this before. Clients really love it. And we've got an online profiling tool for self-evaluation. So if you'd like to try it out for your organization, then do get in touch. So I'll run it through with you really quickly. So the first enabler is perspective. This is about taking a step back and saying, what do I need to know about my organization and my stakeholder framework? How well do I really understand the business? So it definitely includes business acumen, and it also includes things about demographics and so on. But I think we're probably more tuned into that. It's especially the dynamics of how the business works is really key in perspective. And then connection is about building really good connections, building trust, getting to know people really well, understanding what their needs are. And then balance recognizes the complexity that is in the role. So you have lots of different stakeholders, you're spinning plates all the time. You're also responsible for the values of the organization as well as helping with performance. So that's what we look at within balance. Focus then, there is a kind of a chronological sequence here. Focus then is about saying, well, now we've taken all this into account, what are we actually going to do about it? So focus is about planning, making decisions, making diagnosis, and building a business case for what you want to do. And then push kept coming up so much that we realized this needed an enabler of its own. Push is about standing up for HR. It's about pushing forward as well as pushing back when you don't agree. And actually, businesses told us they want HR to do that. Then rigor is about actually delivering and measuring some of those things that you've just got to get right and keep up to date and measuring. And reputation is a really important one because it's a bit like the equity card for actors. You have to do some good stuff before you can get in through the door. So An actor will say, how do I get an equity card unless somebody gives me an acting job? And you can't get an acting job without an equity card. And it's a bit like that in HR. You've got to actually show that you can deliver great stuff before you can get through the door. So those are our enablers. And as I mentioned, the scope of what we do has really expanded to reflect what is going on in HR functions. So strategic alignment is absolutely key. So when you think about how your function works, I mean, this could be like a sort of a checklist for you to think about. To what extent is your function led by business priorities? People analytics is a big area. We've got a great platform ourselves to do that and help people get the data that they've got all into one place. That's really growing fast. Great HR leadership. Business partnering has been a core activity since the beginning. And then coming back to this question about building one HR team, this has come up more and more. So, say, for example, I've been doing an HR business partnering program. I'll always want to talk to the participants before I start the program. And I'll say to them, tell me about a good day and tell me about a bad day, which is a great question, by the way, if you want to get answers that aren't sort of too funneled into one, rather than say, what do you think about communications or what do you think about leadership? It's a really big, fat, open question. So when they say, tell us about a good day, they will talk about their internal clients and stakeholders. They'll say, it's great when my client group say, oh, thank you, that was great. That person's doing really well. Thank you for being so responsive and so on. And then when you say, tell me about a bad day, it will often be about somebody in their own function. So an HRBP saying, well, I've done my bit for this recruitment and I've passed it on. I've got it signed off. I've fed it into the TA team or shared services. And I don't know what's happened to it. And my stakeholder is saying to me, what's happening to my recruitment? And I have to say either, oh, I don't know, I'll come back to you. Or when that happens so many times, they get fed up themselves. They'll say, well, I don't know, that's nothing to do with me. You'll have to contact TA. So you get scenarios like that that really expose the fact that the function isn't working well together. So why is this important now? Joe and I were talking before we opened up the webinar about the fact that there really does seem to be a new energy now to actually transform the function. That's a really big word. So, I mean, another way of putting it might be to elevate the function or to shift the level at which you operate. So, when we think about what's forcing that, some of it might be that it's been an exhausting few years for HR and you're only now getting your head above the water and thinking, right, actually, now's the time I want to do something. Also, we've still got these massive, massive changes in our context. We all know about this, the flexibility, how, where, why we work, AI. Businesses are transforming. So HR has to transform as well and enable them to transform from roles to skills. We've got these massive generational shifts as well. A really dynamic talent landscape that's really been forced by the flexibility in how and where we work. You can recruit people now from a much wider geographic scope, if most of the time, and a relentless drive for efficiencies alongside that. So what that means for HR is that we have to be aligned with business priorities. Businesses really are reshaping themselves. And so it's so important for HR to really understand how the business works, what drives success, and what role does HR play in that. Much more demand for agility, and be really clear about how HR drives success. So, this at the moment is often how we start a project because helping HR really explain how it creates value. It sounds really hard, but once we've got a tool that we call the success model that actually we mentioned in a previous webinar with Joe that helps you to get on one page. What is it that HR does that drives business outcomes? So we often do that to make the links really, really clear. We've got this focus on the employee experience, which is great and actually quite complicated in its way. And also, so many organizations really want to increase their leader maturity. So this has come through a lot with organizations who realize that actually HR's ability to add strategic value is either hampered or aided by the level of leadership maturity. Now, I know that you guys will get that because you can have a conversation with one leader where they completely get what you're saying and they get on board and you know they're committed and they actually then go out and role model the thing that you've talked about, and they actually take your advice and put it into practice. And you can have another leader who really it would much rather use HR as a dumping ground, an admin function, a problem solver, and not involve them more strategically. So it can be a real blocker. Also, really using data. This is definitely the hot topic. Companies saying, we've got loads of data, we've got the data, but working out what to do with it and using it to help us make decisions and present those to business leaders is another matter. And also developing analytics capabilities within our HR team. So that's something that we've added to what we do. And then this really is probably the most important, being a strategic partner. And that means getting involved early in decision makings, you know what I mean? Being in the room when leaders are thinking and not being on the back foot when a decision is made and you think, well, if only they'd told me about that 6 months ago, I could have really, really helped. So you're going to do Menti again now. In your HR function, which nut would you like to crack? So my heading here is we've got this new strategic context, but we've got this really new heightened challenge to raise the level of the function. What nut would you like to crack? So it's quite a broad question. What is the biggest frustration or worst obstacle that you face in achieving what you want to in HR? I'll hide the responses for a minute or two so you can think freely. So for this, you can do one or two word responses or a phrase. Okay, we've got a few in now, so we'll. Us versus them culture with managers. Yeah, I know all of you are going to identify with all of these. This is core, isn't it? Time, yes, resources. This is why we have got to make a strong business case for HR. I was working with a client, he's the head of his HR function, and I said, "Oh, what are you most proud of achieving last year?" And he said, "Well, I've reduced our budget by 10%." And I'm thinking that's a bit disappointing, isn't it? And then I meet his boss and I say, "So what, what's your view on HR?" And he said, "Well, I'm pleased with what they've done on DEI." And so I get the feeling that HR are talking about HR, they're talking about DEI and well-being. They're not talking about improving productivity or creating value. So I said to the CEO, "Well, how about um, you get more visibility on how HR can actually create value?" And he said, "I've never heard of that before." So that tells me that that HRD hasn't talked about that. So we've got to be much more courageous about setting out our stall and making it clear what the ROI is. So, in fact, their HR function is starved of resources and their stakeholders actually want more, which is great. So, change fatigue, ownership, interesting. So is that similar to the us versus them culture with managers? Oh, do put something in the chat. Budget restraints, yeah, time, shifting priorities, yes, of the changing thing, lack of buy-in from the top. Absolutely. This is one of my favorite topics. There's so much data now, and I'm going to show you a bit of it, that proves that when you partner strategically, you can add business value. And we need to use that data. Getting business leaders to see the value. Yes, we've got a theme there. Excluded from SMT. Oh, love to have a chat with you about that. Not listening to advice. That's so frustrating. Not being in the decision room. Blockers within the team. Oh, is that your team? Probably is. Early communication, yeah. Leadership buy-in, getting approval. Most of SLT treating HR as the admin dumping ground. That's when you need a whole fresh approach to change the kind of conversation that you're having with SLT. Lack of resource, having a seat at the table. Yeah, we've got some really strong themes here. Not seeing the bigger picture. Interesting. So that would be our perspective enabler. Internal politics. I wonder if you mean within HR leadership there or business leadership. Lack of understanding of the team and what you do. Deprioritized people initiatives. Well, thank God we're not in America, for goodness sake. Totally knocking out DEI. But you might find that there are some things that get deprioritized here as well. Because there could be things that we really, really care about in HR, but we still have to make a business case for them. Starting a new role next week with a team of senior HR BPs, what advice would you give me to make the best possible start in how to partner and add value? Well, I'd be happy to have a call with you about that. My first tip would be understand what the business needs first. So, as my great friend Asad Hussein would say, who's joined me on some webinars, when he's joined his joined roles as a CHRO, he's actually said to his HR team, before we define our strategy, I'm going to go and find out what the business needs, and then I'm going to feed it back to you. So that would be a very quick recommendation, but I'd love to talk to you about that. Policing to collaborating, that's a really good one. We've got some great stuff in here. Not believing advice, influencing manager immaturity, yeah, as we talked about. Not seen at the same level as other SLT colleagues. Yeah, so here we've got, oh dear, that's exactly what we're here for, isn't it? To make sure that the different parts of HR work together. No recognition for what you deliver. So this is a brilliant list. Thank you all for those. And we have got the classic themes in here, and it helps me to refer to those. So the one of the points about working as one HR team is that you can get much more influence that way. So if we think about that conflict between ER and say an HRBP, that does nothing for HR's influence if you're not speaking from the same hymn sheet. It does nothing for your influence if the COEs are rolling out programs that don't land well in the business. And I've been there in my European role. My boss was in New York, and I'd get those words that you dread them, don't you? Where it says, "Oh, right, what I want you to do is roll this out across Europe." And you think, "Oh my God, that's going to be a nightmare because it's not going to suit my markets. I'm going to have to sell it when actually I maybe don't even believe in it myself. Why didn't they ask me before they did it?" All of that just says that the HR function need to work together. And if you do, you can increase your control and your influence. You can pull together your resources into the topics that the business cares about, the things that they want you to solve. So this is classic Stephen Covey, his, was it 7 tips of successful business people or something? Nothing new there, but still very effective. So what I'm going to do now is take you through some operating models. Now, I'd like to give you a spoiler alert here. What I'm going to say is you really don't need to complicate matters. The three-legged Ulrich model still is the right answer. You just need to make it work. But I just want to reinforce that by showing you some that have been posited by the big consultancies. So here we've got the seminal model. He developed it in the 80s, and broad agreement is this is still the right thing to do, even if this is one person. So if you're one HR person in an organization, you probably know when you're doing something that is a specialist project. And you know if you're advising somebody about something um, as a shared service center would do if you were big enough. Those are the things that probably you wish you could delegate. And business partnering. And what's been happening really is that business partnering has become more and more important because that's how you get HR lined up behind the business. Your HRBPs are the people who understand the business. So you'll all be familiar with that model. So this is Gartner. Now, again, they've still got it. So all of these models, again, spoiler alert, they all still have the three-legged model. They're just trying to make it their own and update it. So we've still got HRBPs, and Gartner say that actually they need to be strategic. I completely agree with that. And when I'm working with an organization, say they've got say they've got 4 business units or 4 key functions or operational areas, they want their own strategic business partner. And to an extent, how HR organizes itself below that is kind of up to HR. They only want to know, who do I talk to? And they want that person to be able to feed in the right resources. So I completely agree with this. Having somebody who can really talk to them at a strategic level, build a really good relationship, has the capability and confidence to coach a senior leader. You do need those capabilities. And then what they're saying here is you need a problem solver pool and people relations managers. So the person who said like conflict between HRBPs and ER, uh, you could say they've probably already got this and it's not working very well. So for me, this is more complicated than that because these strategic business partners need to be able to delegate stuff easily. Because the bottom line is you can't be strategic unless you've got the time to be strategic. So you need to be able to delegate things easily to people who are in tune with you. They know what's happening in the business. You can easily say, oh, you know that issue we had last week? Well, I need you to do this. So we do need, in my view, two levels of business partnering. And now this came out last year. This is brilliant because what they've done at Gartner is actually prove the impact when you do partner strategically. So they're saying employee performance can go up by, on average, 22%. So you'll understand that because you know all the problems you solve and the coaching you do. You will know that you've improved performance day on, day out. You know, you're doing it all the time. And they've actually put a number on it, which is great. Retention, you know that you have an impact on that. You know, the number of the conversations that I used to have in my role about, you know, you just persuade somebody to stay, really, don't you? And get things in perspective and coach them on how to deal with their manager or as well as their team. And then what they've managed to do is calculate the impact on revenue and therefore on profit. So we do have this data that says when we partner strategically, we can increase profit by 9%. So that is great generic data, and you can prove it for your own organization. I've got a client at the moment whose absence costs are way too high. So that's the way we're going to demonstrate HR's value to the bottom line. So then we've got this one. I bet you're groaning even as you look at this one. But here, look in the yellow, we've got the three-legged model. They've still got services, they've got BPs, and they've got experts that they're calling COPs. So you don't need to look at that any longer. Look at this one from Deloitte. But again, they've got business partners, COEs, ops. This is quite interesting because what it obviously you can have a look at this if you want to in the when the slides come out. But the point here being that it does vary a bit. Your approach might vary a bit based on whether your organization is driven by operational excellence, whether it's driven by customer intimacy, or whether it's driven by product leadership. Mercer, so you've still got, this is their shared services. You've still got HRBPs and centers of expertise. And then Josh Burson is saying, actually, you can turn it into a system rather than a model. But when I look at that, I think, well, these things all overlap anyway. So you can see where I'm going with this. You don't need to overcomplicate it because really what your stakeholders need to know is who do I need to talk to about that? And this is why the three-legged model has this huge advantage that you can explain it really easily. The person you need to talk to is your business partner. If it's something more routine, then obviously a lot of HR functions now have portals where you can go in and they've got FAQs and there might be an app and you would communicate that effectively to them. But if one of your stakeholders is thinking, oh, I've got, I've really got this performance issue, or I'm worried we're not going to be able to find these people that I need in 6 months' time, they shouldn't need to think about it. They just know who their business partner is. That is what they want. So when I do these interviews before a program, I interview business leaders. That's all they want. They want one person they can really get to know, they can trust, they can have robust conversations with. And sometimes those conversations involve the HR person giving them feedback. You'll know what that's like. So if you've got that strong relationship, you can do that. So these are some of the considerations. And also this final one about clear career progression. When you keep a very loose, flexible model, you can actually accommodate people moving into different roles. One company I was talking to the other day, I love this. I don't know how long they can sustain it because they're a bit of a startup. They've got 250 people at the moment, but they've got massive growth planned. When the head of HR says, "Oh, I think we need a project on this," like say it's DEI, for example, she'll say to her team, who would like this as a project?" That's brilliant, isn't it? To actually create an appetite for your people to do something where they can shine, something they'll enjoy. Um, so keeping that level of flexibility has a lot to um, commend it, as long as you're really getting the job done and serving your customers. So this is where we get to with Mark Efron. He did an article where he did actually what I've just done. He showed lots of different models and then said, you know what? It's not the bricks. It's not how you build it. It's actually the mortar. It's how you put them together, or and don't make the mortar too firm. Actually keep it loose. So this is the build that I did on the Ulrich model. And I spoke to him before I published it because the last thing I would want to do is upset him because he's a great supporter of the work that we do, apart from being a legend. And so I said to him, well, what I'm doing here is aiming to bring everybody together and clarify the questions that they need to ask at these interfaces. And he thought it was a really strong build on his model. So my heading here is business needs don't fall neatly into HR specialisms. So even if you say retention, even when you think of COEs, they say, oh, well, it's a career path issue, it's an L&D issue, it's a recognition issue. Now, my experience is that COEs are not good at working together, even. We can have silos within a silo. So within the COEs, a lack of collaboration. And that's when you run the risk of your HR function not being business led. So if I was working with a bank a while ago and the guy said, what we really need help from HR on is to get people up to speed more quickly. So these are people working in banks, retail environment. How do we get them up to speed more quickly? Where does that sit? It probably sits everywhere, doesn't it? The business need is getting people up to speed quickly. So that's an example then of what I've got here, which is what is the business problem we want to solve together? What does the business need? So that then, and typically I think it's a good place to start is to get the HRBPs in the same room as the HR experts and say, so what is happening here? Actually really understand the problem. So a good example really is succession planning, where I hear HR directors say, I can't get my leadership team interested in succession planning. And then you think, well, why should they? That is HR jargon. This is another challenge. Oh, we're implementing a succession planning program. Well, why should business leaders get excited about that? They don't use that language. So the language that they use in a company I'm working with at the moment is bench strength. They all talked about bench strength. We haven't got leaders in the right roles. So you can see, we all know how these conversations get, the distance creeps in. Distance creeps in between the front line and the experts. And so we as experts, because we've all got that expert in us as well, we get really interested in something. I did it myself. For me, it was a competency program. I put months of work into it. I absolutely loved it. I got graphics done for it and everything. So by the time I launched it into the business, I was really wedded to it as well. But really, it wasn't what they needed. I went to one of my European markets and he said, "Oh yeah, this is really good, and we do it already." He developed his own way of development structure for his sales reps. Another market said, "We don't need this, and I'm not going to do it." So it's just the wrong direction. If it's our expert heads thinking, "Oh, we must do this because it's best practice," we're setting ourselves up for a fall. I know I'm being challenging here. I hope you don't mind. So think of an example. Business needs don't fall neatly into HR specialisms. Software engineers, for example, you can never get enough of those. And you've got to find them, engage them, and keep them. So it isn't a TA problem. It isn't an L&D problem. It's a problem for every skill within the function. Because one factor would be a competitive benefits package and flexible. There are all these things. And working on those separately won't achieve as much as if all those skilled heads get together and work out how to do it together. And then what we need to do, thinking about this need to create value, this is how we do it. We have to put together a business case. And we're talking here about the impact of the whole function. So we're not saying this leadership program will achieve this. Looking at the value of the whole function is a much more positive and strategic approach to calculating your ROI on projects. So we can work out the business impact of the problem. So current thinking is that really it does cost you 2 years' salary when you lose somebody of that level. There is also business and customer risk, and there's the impact on colleagues. So we can put this into numbers, which is what business leaders want. And then we can put the solution into numbers as well. So I've got some benchmark data here because I know this also comes up a lot about where HR should put its resources. And this was McKinsey last year. So again, this looks rather weird to me. They've got this pool of professionals here, only 5% business partners. I do think there should be more business partners than people in centres of excellence, and that isn't my experience. Another factor, when you think about getting into decision making, something else that I think we need are, say you've got an HR leadership team, you should have more people representing the business on that leadership team. So quite often I'll find they'll have a head of talent management, a head of reward, a head of L&D, and one head of business partnering. And if you've got something like that, it means that the voice of the business isn't loud enough. So here again, you can look at this in more detail in the slides. So they have researched how many people you should have in the function in these different sectors. And also the number of HRBPs. This is interesting. And I think, again, it depends on the type of your business and where you are. So, the client I mentioned earlier who've got the absence problem, they need more HRBPs at the front line, training, coaching line managers to manage performance better, to jump on sickness problems, be far more proactive. And we've made a business case that that will save the business $2 million. So you can make a business case for that. So, a word from Dave Ulrich that sums it up beautifully. In HR departments, it is important that different parts of the operating model care for each other. There needs to be confidence that HR transaction work will be done on time and accurately. Centres of expertise need to be trusted that they will not impose answers. I hear about this far too often, imposing solutions that do not land well and actually just cost the business time. It just rubbishes HR's reputation. Embedded HR professionals need to be able to accurately diagnose current and future business problems. Trust in the HR function should be high due to each area being predictable, dependable, available, accessible, and reliable. Different groups should be aware of scorecards for each group and be delighted when those in other groups do well. We language should replace my language as the metaphor is for HR unity more than isolation. So this is where he's saying it's more about relationships than roles. So again, that's our build. So what we do is we get HR teams together and really challenge them to look at this, to identify, first of all, what is their shared purpose and KPIs, their framework, so they can unite around that, and what are the business priorities. So what can go wrong is basically distance creeping in. So we've got a mentee here. Why does distance creep in between the different parts of HR? What's your experience? So we've got a word cloud coming up here. I'll give you another minute. Okay. So lack of communication, lack of understanding. There's loads here, isn't there? But we've got some clear winners, haven't we? Lack of communication, lack of understanding, conflicting priorities. And we've got more references to communication. Pressure of work is there, but not huge. So, of course, the great thing is, being positive, is that these things can be fixed internally within the function. Lack of communication, lack of understanding, conflicting priorities. The best way to sort out conflicting priorities is to ask the business. So then bringing everybody together, I'm going to move on because I'm running out of time. So when you think about the things that everybody wants from HR, so picking up this point about conflicting priorities and needing to get everybody on the same page, what do your stakeholders see as HR priorities? Takes a bit of thinking about this, doesn't it? And of course, the length of time it takes you to think about it is telling you something as well. Great, we've got loads of answers coming in, so let's have a look. So that's interesting. We've got culture and performance in the middle. This is where we really need to challenge ourselves that business leaders they're targeted on profit, on productivity. So culture is really important. Oh, ER, it's interesting. We've got that in there. Performance, absolutely. Performance management, reduce headcount. So you can see where you've got things that are directly related to profitability. We've got quite a broad range here, haven't we? Although we have got themes that didn't group themselves quite as clearly as they could have done, like cost saving, reducing headcount. So the word that I would invite you to keep in your minds at all times is profit. Things that have an impact on profit, where you can create a link between what you're doing and your organization's profitability or performance, if it's a public sector organization, meeting the needs of your stakeholders. So you can actually ask them. We have a tool for doing this. And actually, we've got a DIY version of this as well. So if you wanted to do a survey like this, so we've got this link here and that'll come out in the PDF. So it's really saying, in the context of today's business priorities, how important is, for example, recruiting and onboarding talent at the moment? And how effective are HR at that? And you can build up a picture so that you can actually be guided by the business as to what they want from HR. What do they want you to prioritize? And that is how you get a seat at the table. So we've got a list that we use to get them to score against. And also, we get them to score this, evaluate HR on this, understanding how the business works, building trusting relationships, and so on. So getting feedback is something that HR doesn't do very often and could do more. So the thing that brings the HR team together is this: shared purpose and KPIs. So for those of you that said that your biggest issue is communication, unclear priorities, conflicting priorities, you can tackle that. So collaboration really is the key, and asking the question about what we need to work out is how to get people to high performance more quickly, how to reduce absence costs, and do that as a function and not let, for example, talent management run away with it as a project. That's what happens. It needs to be a shared initiative. And then when you're looking at HRBPs and HR ops, once you know the right way to do something, the question is, how do we do that more often? How do we make it easier, provide a better service? And equally, once you've got a really good solution, say in talent management, how do we do it more efficiently? How do we automate it? How do we use tech? So again, it's what we need to work out is as a function, these are classic team building questions. How we pull together, how we get aligned, how we learn from what we've done, how we work together, clarity of roles and so on, which came up. And processes and tools, there are lots of things that you can do in that area. And then HR leadership is key because obviously, if you have a strong leader, they are able to bring the team together. And that is a whole other webinar to have more about that. So, a final question for you is when you think about building the reputation of one HR team, so you can see that you've got the benefits of really leveraging HR's reputation if you are working as one team. You can identify the right business problem. What is it that's keeping your business leaders awake at night? Make impact on that problem. You consolidate relationships in doing that, and you build HR's reputation. So my last question for you is, what do you want HR to be known for? It's a function to be proud of, isn't it? I'm really proud to be in the HR function because the work that you do has real value. It has value to the world as well as to your business. When you've got happy, rewarded employees, that impacts their communities, their families. We've got a lot of variety here again, haven't we? Let's see. Oh, so we've got the word strategic a lot here. Strategic business partnering, driving success, achieving the business goals, trusted advisor, adding value. That is brilliant. Really, really strong stuff. And if I were to compare that, I'm struck by how different that is to the answers that you gave to the earlier question about what your stakeholders really want, because I think they'd say more of this. Excellent. So you can see what you think when you look back at this. So I've taken all my time. So you'll find on the slide we've got, if you like the style of this webinar, there's a recording there that you can get on one that I did with my colleague Assad, who's been a CHRO 4 times. He's brilliant to listen to. And a bit about us, but that's enough from me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Deborah. So just before I do the close, I just wanted to introduce one of my colleagues, Emily Formby. Our group has recently introduced a new group called Charity Recruit. Emily is going to be running an event next week and just wanted to explain the details of it to everybody.
Thanks, Joe. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on. It sounds like you've had a great session, and I hope my session next week is just as productive as the one that you've just all had. Yeah, so next week, Charity Recruit are launching our first event, which is going to be held online on Thursday at 1 o'clock, and it's all around fundraising and the psychology of fundraising. We've got a guest speaker called Lewis, who's got a great amount of experience. Understanding the psychology of donors, and he's going to talk to you about how to make the best or get the best out of your donors. So should be a great session. So thank you for having me on. It was just to come and highlight that to you. Joe's going to pop a link in her follow-up email with the joining link there, and if you feel free to share it with any colleagues or organisations that you think might benefit from that.
Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Joe.
So we'll send out some correspondence to everyone that's signed up for the event this afternoon, and I'll put a post on LinkedIn. So if you'd like a copy of the follow-up information from Deborah or a copy of the recording, then please put a comment against the LinkedIn post. HR Recruit's next event is on the 1st of April and is called Handling the Disciplinary Process. So the link to my event and also to Emily's event will be included in the follow-up email. If anyone's recruiting, we've also got accountancy recruit, charity recruit, FD recruit, and exec recruit. Otherwise, I'd just like to say a massive thanks to Deborah for your time and effort in putting the event together, and to everybody for tuning in. It's been a great session, so hopefully you've taken lots away. Thank you.